Today we are celebrating Jesus' ascension into heaven. As we just heard in today's gospel, a cloud envelops Jesus, and he is lifted up into the sky to the astonishment of his apostles who are looking on. So many beautiful and famous works of art depict this moment of Jesus' ascension. But did it really happen this way? Did the apostles literally see Jesus' body rise up and disappear into the sky? Did Jesus really defy the law of gravity? Well, Bishop John Shelby Spong, one of the world's leading biblical scholars today, asks somewhat sarcastically, do you suppose that Jesus went up past the moon and perhaps took a right at Mars? And Father Richard Rohr tells us that we shouldn't believe in what he calls a rocket ship Jesus, that this isn't some beam me up Scotty moment. As we heard in our words of integration and guidance this morning, the stories of the Bible are not meant to be understood literally. The stories of the Bible are meant to be understood symbolically or spiritually. John Dominic Crossan, one of the world's leading theologians and a member of the famous Jesus Seminar, said this: "My point once again is not that those ancient people told literal stories and we are now smart enough to take them symbolically, but that they told them symbolically and now we're dumb enough to take them literally." Now, is it possible that Jesus defied the law of gravity on that day? Well, sure. All things are possible with God. But today we're not celebrating some supernatural event that may or may not have happened to a man from Nazareth more than 2,000 years ago. The ascension is about us. It symbolizes the spiritual ascension that takes place in us when we allow the Spirit of the divine to envelop us and lift us up so that we too can enter into the kingdom of heaven. Now, where is the kingdom of heaven? Jesus had a lot to say about this place in the Gospels, but never once did he describe the kingdom of heaven as a place all the way up in the clouds that we go to after we die. What did he say about the kingdom of heaven? Well, he said, the kingdom of heaven is at hand, that it is here and now. And he said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. That's where Jesus ascended. That's where he returned to God's dwelling place. And the purpose of the spiritual life is for us to ascend, to arise in consciousness, so that we too can enter into the kingdom, not in the next life, but in this one. Now, Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines the word ascension as the process of rising to a higher place. The ascension is a process. Our rising in consciousness, our spiritual awakening doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. Symbolically, the ascension happens 40 days after Easter. Now, I've shared with you before that the number 40 appears a lot in the Bible. We know that Moses spent 40 days and nights atop Mount Sinai. We know that Jonah spent 40 days in Nineveh, that the Noah's Ark story was 40 days and nights, that Jesus spent 40 days and nights alone in the desert. This, of course, is not a coincidence, for the number 40 in the Bible is not a literal number. It's a symbolic number, and it represents the time it takes for the workings of the Spirit to be made manifest. So Lent is the 40 days before Easter. and the ascension is 40 days after Easter. It's a process, the process of life and death and resurrection and new life. And we are a part of that process. That is what the spiritual life is all about. It is about us arising, awakening to new life and to new ways of being. Now, in his book, Spiritual Liberation, the Reverend Michael Beckwith outlines what he calls the 4 stages of spiritual awakening. The first stage, which is the lowest stage of consciousness, is called the to-me stage. This is the stage where people believe that everything in life is happening to them, that they are victims of circumstance. And they say things like, "Why is this happening to me?" But as we grow in spiritual consciousness, we arise to the next stage, which is the by me stage, where we begin to realize that life is not happening to us, but by us. That when we change our thoughts, we can change our lives. This is a wonderful stage to be in, but we're only halfway there. There's still 2 more stages to go. The third stage is known as the through me stage. This is the stage of surrender, where we let go and stop trying to control things. We just allow God to work through us so that we can become instruments of peace and channels of grace. And the fourth and final stage of consciousness is known as the as me state. This is the state where I and the Father are one. I and the Mother are one. God as me. This is the state of consciousness that was achieved by Jesus and the other ascended masters. So how do we know if we're rising in consciousness? If our purpose for being is to arise from the to me state to the as me state, how do we know that we're progressing on the spiritual path? Well, I recently read the 12 symptoms of spiritual awakening, and they are an increased tendency to let things happen rather than make them happen, frequent attacks of smiling, feelings of being connected with others and nature, frequent overwhelming episodes of appreciation, a tendency to think and act spontaneously rather than from fears based on past experience, an unmistakable ability to enjoy each moment, a loss of ability to worry, a loss of interest in conflict, a loss of interest in interpreting the actions of others, a loss of interest in judging others, a loss of interest in judging self, and gaining the ability to love without expecting anything in return. My friends, despite what you may be hearing, the human race is awakening, rising in consciousness. More and more people are awakening to the truth. So do not be discouraged. Keep rising. For as we keep rising, we lift up the world and we give other people permission to rise so that all of us together can bring about the kingdom of heaven right here on earth. Namaste. Hello, everybody. This is Sal Sapienza, and I'm so excited to share with all of you that I've written a brand new book. The book is called Childish Thinking: How the Church Keeps Us Stuck in Sunday School. Now, the title Childish Thinking comes from Christian scripture, where we hear that if we wish to grow in spiritual understanding, then we must let go of childish ways of thinking. And yet so many Christians today, even after years of Bible study and Sunday services, still have a very elementary understanding of their faith. They still understand God as some old man with a long gray beard. They think heaven is a place up in the clouds with pearly gates, that the devil is some red guy with horns and a pitchfork, and that hell is a fiery place below the earth. Those are things that we tell children. None of those descriptions appear anywhere in the Bible. And so in childish thinking, I try to dispel many of those misnomers, and I explore topics such as God, Jesus, heaven, hell, sin, prayer, and resurrection from the higher perspectives of ancient Christian mystics and contemporary progressive theologians. After each chapter, there are prayers for quiet contemplation and questions for personal reflection and journal writing. Come learn how you can let go of old ways of thinking and begin to see things with new eyes. Come and learn how you can finally graduate from Sunday school. The book is available now on Amazon, and you can read the entire introduction at childishthinking.faith.